Welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be talking about Mircea Eliade, who is, again, kind of a cryptic, interesting, little-known author with a ton of ideas, so I could probably grow blue in the face talking about this guy. He's also one of those strange authors that you can keep reading and reading and reading and gaining new insight, and so it's one of those things that I enjoy talking about because it's kind of difficult to understand because he doesn't always define his ideas in extremely precise ways. I think part of what he's doing is trying to make sure that people are interested in ideas by saying things in a very vague way. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking about Eliade and his idea called the terror of history. Eliade is, among other things, a really interesting writer in the capacity that he has to sort of critically look into cultures, kind of like a detective, that have religious ways of thinking. He tries to understand the representative way that the human brain processes knowledge. He also believes that those who study religions will recognize symbols that repeat, and he's really interested in cyclical patterns. I think that's one of the things that will just keep coming up. This is sort of a central idea to his theory of the terror of history. He thinks that cyclical patterns represent the conception of the divine, especially to people who are performing rituals or passing down myths and legends and that sort of thing. If there's any hint of something with a divine element, he believes that it some way circles back to a cyclical pattern. The terror of history is pretty much the idea that Mircea Eliade puts forth. People attempt to exempt themselves or get themselves away from history because people are more or less really afraid that their lives will have no meaning. Mircea Eliade sort of takes it for granted that meaning cannot be found within history. Sort of one of the precepts that he goes with, he has an idea about, and he takes it as an axiom. So it's one thing that definitely can be disagreed with, but it's one of the things for at least the terror of history that he's pretty interested about. Among other things, his cyclical idea of time is one of the things that he believes people who are highly interested in rituals and myth are trying to bring about. They want and they crave and they actively seek a cyclical understanding of time. Eliade also mentions that major religious traditions in the East, in particular, reinforce this idea. He mentions Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and he also mentions that even Zoroastrianism and Greek religious traditions follow this pattern. Eliade's theory of history states that people fear life without meaning while they are part of history. So according to Eliade, people can use myths to put themselves in a cyclical time frame, which is more akin to the divine world they are seeking. Eliade believed that groups of people see linear history as profane, which offers no relief from everyday struggles and suffering. Eliade also figures that rituals also help to reenact myths and bring people closer to the divine by distancing themselves from the profane and thereby bringing ritualistic participants closer to the divine that they seek. The terror of history is an explanation that rationalizes why religions have taken shape over history. It is an etiology or origin explanation with a coping mechanism built in to explain why humans value religion so highly and why it's such an integral part of so many civilizations and social lives and people throughout history. This is just one way in which Eliade in particular builds his case that religion cannot be reduced. It's something that is absolutely essential to humanity as a whole, and particularly to many of the things that he uses as evidence. Many of the older cultures that he reads about, he particularly finds their religions to be interesting and uses evidence that he reads about regarding their religion to justify his ideas. And just find this interesting. I hope you learned something about it, and I hope you find maybe something that Eliade's ideas may make more clear to you about myth, ritual, or maybe even just about the sacred or divine in your own life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay fantastic. Thank you. Wait, but you thought the video was done. But no, I was done with the video too. But then I forgot. Planned a bonus. Mircea Eliade's idea of the terror of history seems similar to the thought process of how people stave off hard nihilism or utter meaninglessness, except Eliade's idea more or less details that rituals and myths and the sacred factor in a little more heavily. Eliade's terror of history idea, more or less, is all about, as we talked about, people fearing a life without meaning. One such corollary is Buddhism, which recommends thinking between two extremes, which in English usually is translated as the middle way. The two primary extremes are nihilism, or you could also say materialism, and eternalism, or you could also say permanence. But Buddhism recommends going between the two, because that way you kind of have a blended mix of what's real and what's not. That way you stave off sort of the idea that everything exists or nothing exists. Eliade doesn't take that view. He just kind of says cyclical versus linear time frame. He doesn't actually reference linear in particular, but he believes that the religious capability in the human mind helps people prevent everyday suffering by thinking about the sacred. So that's my sort of Buddhist tie-in to Eliade's thought, and this is the true end of the video, and I do appreciate you sticking to the end. Thank you very much. Hope to see you in the next video.